Hey, hey, hey. What's up, guys? Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Let's take a look at the markets. Bitcoin continues to pull back here a little bit after topping around 9,200. Had that very sharp pullback over the weekend. We looked at that on Monday when I did that live stream, and I'll go over what I was looking for at the start of this week, some scenarios I was looking for, and then where we are at now. And for those of you that are not members of the Slack group yet, or the insiders group, you'll get my daily updates, or almost daily. And that's usually the weekends I'll not post a whole lot, but during the week, regular updates, chart updates, my thoughts on the market, that sort of thing. You can get that in the Slack group. But there's a few altcoins that are actually holding up pretty good, and so definitely want to look at those. I'm going to go over BTC here today, but then I'm also going to look at a few names both on the long side and the short side that I think are worth watching for potential trading setups. And so we'll look at those. Let's give it another minute or so here. We'll see how things start to shake out here. Let's let some folks join us. But thanks for being here today. Welcome, everyone. It looks like the comments are starting to come in. So just to kind of very quickly set the tone, a few names we're going to look at here first. Of course, BTC, and then some of the alt BTC pairs. On the downside, BCH and ETC, Ethereum Classic, I'm looking at as potential shortable trades there versus Bitcoin. They, to me, feel like they're probably topping here a little bit. We've had that bounce, the lower high bounce that I was looking for, and potentially downside names. Yeah, Dash is definitely one to note on that list. That one's looking a little bit more positive, so we'll look at that one. And then I've got on the upside EOS, ETH, and Stellar Lumens as far as big cap names go. From the small cap land, Engine, Theta are the only two on my list right now. In big cap land or middle cap land, I want to also put Tezos. That's been in play. I've been on that trade for this week and pretty much closing that one out here. I'll go over that. And then let's see here, Engine, Theta, and that's it. Anything else you guys want to look at? I'll try to keep it relatively short again. It probably won't be a real long stream. It's more of a market update with some thoughts on levels to watch here near term. But like I said, there's some potential alts that are shaping up to maybe outperform Bitcoin if we can find some price stability here around this range. Yeah, we'll look at Link. I think that one's worth noting, so let's put that one on the list there. All right, let's get to it here. All right, so real quick here on the Node Insiders, the BMI matrix here at the top left, clearly in the red week. The bot status, again, calculates a little bit slower. I think the next calculation for the daily strategy will be happening probably during the course of this stream. As long as this remains above that 0.4, I don't see it taking it out to the downside, so it might not go flat yet, but it's certainly not in the strong trend anymore. It's pulling back, but it's still holding against some key moving averages, which we'll look at here shortly, so that's why it hasn't triggered. Of course, the 4-hour strategy has been flat here since the weekend after that first big pullback from that 9K level. Looking at the altcoins here, I'm going to switch to the bot status for just the 4-hour, what's long, what's short. There's a handful of names. Atom, it's actually short on the 4-hour, but long daily, so it's kind of a mixed thing there. But EOS, Bitcoin Cash, and Tezos are the only ones here. Flat on ETH. I like ETH though. I'm going to take a look at that one here. But most everything else is kind of caution / weak. But there are within this list a few names definitely worth noting here. You can see on the daily strategy versus Bitcoin, most of the alts are actually still holding up relatively well. And so this little pullback that we're seeing may actually be a good place to start looking at potential secondary entries on some of these alts. Not all of them. It always is in context. Some of them are actually turning the corner, I think, and starting a little bit of a downtrend. But a lot of them are holding up well. So mixed bags there. But I'm still preferring bigger caps over the small cap names here. But the last few days here on the trending list, it's mostly been small cap. I would even argue crap coins on the list here. And so the last few days has been that. There's been a couple of them that are worth noting, but we've just seen some in and out of just like these small cap, micro cap names pumping off the lows. And that just kind of shows you the overall market depth, right? Not a lot of big cap names trending strongly versus Bitcoin, as this pullback has, just kind of taken its course there. So let's get to it. Let's go look at the BTC chart here. Going to Bitcoin. I don't have any moving averages or anything marked up on the chart here. What I want to just show is the broader price point here. This is a chart I posted in the Slack group on Monday when price was just kind of in the chop zone here that we saw, the big wicks, the big ups and down. And what I was looking for, and I alluded to this a little bit on the Monday live stream, was I was looking for a bounce off of these lows, some tight range, almost a BART move up. But I was looking for a little bit higher. I was going for, 89.50, maybe 9K. And this was the range that I wanted to see a bounce fade into. And I wanted to reinitiate some of the short positions. So I initially took a short trade here. It was a very quick short trade. Took the quick gains on that. And I was looking for a bounce, kind of a lower high to start rescaling into those shorts. Never got it. The move that we saw here, during the chop zone, it was just kind of a lot of wicks up and down. 8,500 continued to hold, and then we saw the big shakedown and then the pop, but it couldn't even crack 8,800. Price just bounced shy of 8,800. Couldn't really get much above that. I had some pre-orders kind of scaled in at these levels here, which of course never were filled. And so I closed those out. Watching it yesterday, started thinking, man, this looks like it's rolling over. Was that the end of the bounce? The long side target to the downside was this 8,200 to 8,300 range. That was my Monday target after the bounce. So the 8,800 bounce turned out to be it. And then here, of course, in the last day, seeing this pulling back, and it's now back into this range here, right? So this is an interesting horizontal support zone. If you look left, you got this first swing high here, which is around 8,400, and then you've got this little range that was set up here, and that created that last breakout, which ran up to that 9,000 range. The top of that range sits around 8,200, right? So that space in between was the basis for my first target, right? The space between here and here is how I set up this little range, and that also lined up with some moving averages on the daily chart, which we'll look at here in a minute. And so I was looking at that zone. Let me erase that to that zone back here between 8,200 and 8,300, or actually it was 8,200 to 84 or so, as kind of that broader range. And we're seeing it hit there. Now the question is, is this an opportunity to start scaling back in the long side, or is this the beginning of a broader downtrend, right? We've got the first drop, then the bounce, which was pretty anemic, to be honest, and then the next leg down. So we've seen kind of both legs down. Now the question is this it, or are we going to see the crack right through support and really shake some things out? I'm thinking we might get a bounce here first. The first test on the upside now is going to be this little range here around 8,500. And so if we do see that bounce, that's going to be interesting to see how it acts. And ideally, on the higher time frames, you want to see some consolidation at this level. You want to see a bounce into 8,500, maybe a pause, pull back, maybe set up a double bottom or sort of thing, and then the rally will continue ideally, right, if the bulls are going to remain in control. And the reason that is, if we go to the daily chart, this all starts to line up pretty nicely with some moving averages. So let me add the 10 and the 22 EMA on my chart, then I'll flip over to the daily view. Let me erase these arrow markups, which we don't really care for on the daily view. And I'll take the lines off as well. And so we can see here, going to the daily chart now, right? We've had this nice rally up, which of course couldn't really break above 9,100. No big surprise there. We were all looking at that major resistance level as a potential turning point, the 200-day moving average, the 618 retracement, price resistance levels, downtrend lines, all that stuff lined up pretty nicely. And as I mentioned, right, a couple weeks back, ideally you'd like to see a pullback, maybe some sideways consolidation here for the next several weeks, and that would really set things up for a big push over that 9K level. But near term, what's going to happen, right? So what are we looking at near term? If I really zoom in here, you can see the 22 EMA is right at around 82.75, 82.80 on this daily chart, and the 10 EMA is now up here around 8,500, right? That's starting to roll back a little bit as price pulls in, and this is a little bit of a value zone, but I think these moving averages need some consolidation, right? So ideally you'd see the 10 kind of do one of these, and then price will start to set up as the 22 EMA would catch up. That's the bull case, right? If you want the bulls to continue to remain in control, this is nothing more than a healthy pullback at this point. And this is what we want to see. We want to see these dips, higher daily lows being set, right? The last daily low was down here at 76.75 on January 10th. So, you want to see a higher low somewhere above that. Ideally, above 8K, right? That'd be the strongest scenario if we can hold here and then start to rally. So that's what I'm looking for. This is the first level to watch. This little zone that I highlighted here between 8,200, 8,400. It was the first downside target from the pullback. We're there now. And if you go to the short-term time frames, not quite oversold on the 4-hour. It is hitting that 30 level. Not extreme oversold. But on the 1-hour, certainly has dipped down into those extreme oversold levels at the 21. Could continue lower. Doesn't mean they always bounce right off that. But I'd like to see a little bit of holding up here around these levels. So for the day, going into the close for the next, whatever that is, 7 hours, 8 hours or so before the end of the daily close, I want to see price hold above 8,200 on a closing basis. So, some of the chop around here would be ideal. And then a bounce. And then the first target on the way up is going to be around 8,500. That's going to be your first resistance level. And from there, we'll have to wait and see how price action looks. Got to wait for the volume, see how the volume looks on the bounce. But personally, I'm not expecting like a huge V bottom here where it just takes off and here we go right back to 8K or 9K, right? Ideally, like I said, I'd like to see a bounce, maybe some sideways stuff. Let just things kind of settle out a little bit on the daily chart. That would really set things up again. But if the worst case scenario plays out and this thing just loses the support and the bottom drops out, then the next major zone to be watching is really around here, this 8K to 7,800 or so. That's going to be your next major support zone. Don't really want to see the daily chart lose that, because that would start to negate the daily higher low pattern and would really put a turn on the broader uptrend that we've seen here since that $6,400 low, which is totally possible. Remember, we've been looking at this bigger picture daily chart with this being a significant resistance level. There's a lot of time left before the halving, and to be fair, I said, hey, if it starts to really lose the bottom, then I don't think these lows from a month ago hold, and I think we actually make a lower low. That would really shock some people. I don't think people are ready to hear 6Ks again, right? We're all, hey, that was a low and we're ready for 10Ks, but that's absolutely a possibility, something just to make note of there. But one day at a time, of course. From a trading perspective, I'm looking at this as a potential dip buying opportunity for a quick bounce trade. From there, we just got to wait and see. I'm not looking to short at this point. If the daily chart really loses the low, then I'll short into like a bear flag or a bounce at that point, maybe in the next week. But at this point, I think the short downside opportunity, it's a higher risk at this point. You're at more risk of a bounce than you are of, just a straight drop move past 8K. So I think the better short was, up here, or even yesterday when we were looking at that bounce fail. You could have taken a quick spike to the downside. And I know some of you guys on the Slack group were looking at that as a potential downside trade. I posted in this group yesterday that I was basically just flat waiting it out, looking for more of a dip opportunity at this point, which I'm seeing. And so that's it for the BTC side of things. Let's go look at some of the names. If you're just joining, a couple of names I'm going to run through and look at here today. There's some good altcoin opportunities, I think, setting up here if Bitcoin can find some support this range. And I'm looking at some of these names to outperform Bitcoin. And some of those include EOS, Ethereum, Stellar, Theta, Link, Engines, one we'll look at here. And what else? Then on the downside, I'm actually looking at BCH and ETC, Ethereum Classic, to potentially break down from here versus Bitcoin. So something to watch if you're looking to maybe on the short side, something that's going to outperform Bitcoin on the downside, then those are some names I'd be watching there. So let's get to those. Going to the bearish case first, looking at Bitcoin Cash versus BTC here. This is what I'm watching here, right? Let's go to the daily charts here. We've had this very strong move, and then of course it started to get real choppy here near the highs, created a climactic high there with a big reversal candle here on the daily chart, which is now starting to just kind of wedge up. That's really the best way to say it. If we go to the 4-hour view here, let me take off the RSI and all that good stuff. This is just kind of wedging up, but what I'm going to be looking for is a break of this little downtrend. This just is not a overall bullish pattern. Generally, when you have kind of that look, it doesn't take a whole lot for it to crack to the downside, and so that's what I'm looking at here. Don't have a position on this one yet in any direction, but if it does crack to the downside, this is going to create a little kind of a head and shoulder type of pattern, and at minimum I'd be looking for a retest of this support zone down here, and below that there's not a lot of support. It's just a big gap, and so anywhere between here and there would be your kind of your major target if it starts to crack that trend line. So BTC or BCH certainly looking as a potential bear flag break, however you want to call that, wedge. It's just looking at that downtrend line, which at this point would be also the 22 EMA on the 4-hour. So a little bit low, call it 39.3 would be I would expect to see some more downside there, but again, just waiting for that trend line to crack here. Another one to be watching here is ETC. Very similar price structure here versus Bitcoin. I'm already marked this one up here. Had that second higher or lower high bounce that I was looking for. You had that first drop, and then it just starts to bounce up. Also looking a little wedgy like, and so not a bullish price structure generally speaking. And so odds favor more downside on ETC. I think it's done. It needs some pullback. If we pull the daily 10 EMA on here real quick, that's that's approaching the daily 10 EMA. Does it hold? That's a big question. But I'm thinking this is probably a good short trade versus Bitcoin here to the downside. So those are the two bearish looking ones that I'm watching right now. The other one is on the downside. Let's go look at Dash first here, because I know that was one of the big winners here. This is one that I was watching for two potential scenarios. One, that lower high bounce, but I said, on the bullish case, the best thing you want to see is this kind of sideways action, maybe an ascending triangle base, symmetrical pattern, something like that, which would allow the daily chart to consolidate. And so that's really the key to be watching here. Let me move these lines off. If it breaks below these moving averages on the daily, it's probably done. Wouldn't be surprised to see a lower high or lower low at this point, but the most you want to see its drop here is around this level on the daily chart. If it really starts to lose that point, then it could be the end of the move, and you'll start a little bit of a downtrend. But for now, I'm not so sure I'd be buying the dip on Dash just yet. It's still very extended. I'm going to certainly keep an eye on it, because I think from a longer term perspective, meaning the next couple of weeks, if it can consolidate, oops, sorry about moving around. If it can consolidate, this would be ideal. That'd be the better case scenario. If it just continues to pull back, then I'm going to look to see if there's some support found around this level. But for now, just going to wait and see on Dash. How does it look on the USD side here? I haven't looked at it from that perspective. Let's go to Dash USD on Coinbase. Right at the daily 10 EMA, trying to hold a support here, and then below that, probably don't want to see it get much below 80, call it 88, much below 88, 87.50, give or take. Then starts to kind of lose the moving average support at that point. EOS. Now EOS is on the top of my list in terms of potential alts to outperform on the way up. If we go to the daily chart here, remember this one had a pretty strong breakout from a long time resistance level on some very strong volume. It did run short of this first swing high target from July. You can see there was a couple of quick wicks up there, but didn't really quite get that high, pulling right back to the 10 EMA. The moving averages, let me zoom in here for you guys. The moving averages are now catching up to price, and so far it's held above this little breakout point, which I have highlighted in the blue box there. And the 22 EMA on the daily is right in the middle of that zone. So even if we do see another little dip back in here, As long as it continues to hold up above this point, I'm going to watch this one for a potential secondary entry slash throwback, whatever you want to call it, for a breakout move past that first target there. And this already had that throwback. It may be hard to see, but there's a wick that takes it right to the bottom of that blue range there and has been bouncing the last couple of days. But this one's certainly worth watching here. If we go to the 4-hour chart, you know, it's finding some support, kind of just sitting tight here above this range. And it's looking positive all around. Certainly has held up better than many of the other alts here versus Bitcoin. And a lot of the big cap names, you know, relative to BTC, didn't really see that huge drawdown that you typically see when Bitcoin has a sharp move lower. They kind of just held their own. And in some cases, they bounced a little bit versus Bitcoin. So that just looks positive all around for the altcoin market, and we're seeing that, you know, in the BTC dominance as the BTC dominance pulls back a little bit here, and so all around that's positive. But again, this is just week one of a potential pullback, so got to watch that. But on the upside, EOS is certainly on my list for some outperformance here. It's holding up relatively well. Along the same lines, ETH BTC is looking pretty good here, has held up well. Let me clear some of this back lines. We can see so far making higher lows. This little trend line continues here, and it's starting to really tighten up between, you know, horizontal target here and the lower trend line. And so over the next couple of days, it's going to be decision time for whether or not this guy decides to push out a range or drop the trend line. And if it does drop the trend line, then this is kind of your first support back in here. Also the daily moving averages, right, would be your first target, so they'd be a little bit higher up. But all around, I'm liking ETH holding up relatively well versus BTC here. Odds favor more upside here based on just the technicals. First major target would be that yellow line up here around, you know, 2001 or so, and then above that, you know, up here. But ideally you might want to just go with the USD side for potential support resistance level. So pulling right back along with Bitcoin here on the USD side. If you go to the support levels, back in here would be the first range to be watching if it continues to drop. That puts it around between 158 and 152 would be your first major support that you want to see it hold. But on this pullback, volume has been declining, so we'll see if that one turns the corner. But versus Bitcoin, holding up pretty good, so definitely worth watching here. And if it starts to reverse and go higher from here, then of course it's got to reclaim that 175 level, and then above that you're looking at about 190 for your next major target to the upside. And that lines up well with these support or prior resistance levels back in here. So that's how I would be looking at that one for more upside if it continues. And this would be a nice little pullback entry on the downside. So definitely one I'm watching here. And then let's see here. Stellar Lumen had a pretty big move relative to BTC here on the daily chart, and it's still above the daily 10 EMA. That's how strong that move was. Very big volume, pulling back on lighter volume. You can see down here the red volume compared to the green volume, much smaller, and so definitely one to watch on this pullback for a potential throwback entry in and around that zone. Still well above this little breakout point here, and the moving averages have now caught up, and so this one has had some good relative strength here versus Bitcoin. So definitely one to be watching here on the 4-hour view. You know, RSI is not quite oversold yet, but it's interesting to note this did bounce right to the 50% retracements before pausing. So one to watch on the daily time frame. I think it looks pretty good for a potential reversal here from this broader downtrend it's been in. Popping, I see a pullback, make a higher low, and then we want to see some new upside action here versus BTC. Tezos, it's been on this trade for most of the week here. Has done its job in terms of holding up and even outperforming versus Bitcoin, but I think it's starting to run its course here. Would not surprise me to see some more pullback, at least the daily 10 EMA on this chart. My target on this guy was that 1900 to 1950 range, and we got there yesterday, or maybe even this morning, just barely. And so I've been scaling out of this guy here as we've been bouncing. I took some off yesterday when it cracked that $1.60 mark on the USD pair, but also I've been watching both pairs on this one because there's some good levels to be watching on both. but it's pulling back here. The daily 10 EMA sits, I believe, it's down here around 1740, which is also a little bit of a prior level back in here. So would not surprise me to see some more pullback action to that point. Is there a bearish divergence on this guy? Let's see here. Slightly, yeah, with this most recent swing high. It's slight. Not huge, but definitely worth noting. And so it's been a good one. Has had a nice run. Has held up very well in terms of, most of the other names in the market. Yesterday had a very strong day. But maybe it's done for now. Here was yesterday. Once it started to crack this prior high back here, I took half off, kind of over that 160 mark. And it's pulling back now, and I'm thinking it's probably done for now on the BTC pair, and so pretty much have scaled out of that guy. And it was a good trade. It was all right. It wasn't a monster trade, but hey, can't complain. I mean, all around. I mean, it's from this swing low here at 140s at the peak, it was up about 15%. So not a bad little swing in terms of the overall market, right? Considering what the overall market has done, that was one of the better ones. All right, so a few names moving today. Engine. Popping off the lows here. Let me go to the daily chart on Engine. We looked at this one maybe a week or so back during this last live stream, and of course it did break below that descending triangle, had to continue, pulled back to the downside, dropped another from here 20%, and has had a nice little bounce here today, pushing right back to that. So look at where it's pushed right to. This downtrend line, the prior horizontal resistance line. Let me clear some of these moving averages. That's looking too messy. And bounce right back to that point. You're seeing a little bit of a pause there now, some buying, some selling pressure showing up as it pushed right into that point. Getting over that level, though, is going to be significant. If it can recapture and start holding above, just call it 1,000 sat, then that's going to start to look positive and potentially show, the turning of the trend. So ideally, what you want to see in these type of scenarios is that strong move up, maybe some sideways, some drifting down, and then a bounce off that level. And that's generally the pattern you want to see in terms of it finding a good bottom, turning the corner. But good little bounce here today. I don't know what the reason is. I haven't really been following this project. I don't know if there's some news or anything like that, but nice little move on Engine here today. And then Theta was breaking resistance yesterday. It's still holding up. Again, this is a little bit more wide and loose of a name, but you can see this rounding pattern here at the bottom. This horizontal price point popped above it yesterday on some very good volume, well above average volume there, but has pulled right back, undercut it slightly, but so far holding right above the line there. So one to be watching. This could be a good throwback entry, but again, this name's a little bit tougher. Definitely wide and loose. A lot of big moves up, quick moves right back down. Not exactly a trending name just yet here. And last but not least, we'll go look at Link BTC here. And this one, interestingly enough, ran almost perfectly to that prior target. We can see here a couple of attempts to get over, could not. This is the Link BTC chart, and has had a pretty quick pullback, a little spike that took it all the way back down to here, bouncing right back above the line, but it's right at the moving average pair on the daily. With some pretty good volume. So that turned out to be the near-term top. Now you're looking for a higher daily low to form, and ideally above this level that it just found a low at. So that's where you want to see that daily form. 4-hour chart starting to trend lower, right? You got a high, a low, a lower high, a lower low. Even if it bounces up to 305 or so, that would still be a lower high technically. So definitely want. I'd be a little bit more cautious on this guy. How's it look on the USD side? Yeah, definitely is breaking support here on the USD side. You can see this, this kind of rolling over here. Almost I wouldn't call it a huge double top, but, a little double top-ish, right, with that, and starting to crack lower here. If you did a measured move on this guy, if that's what you're looking at is a double top, then, you're talking down here, which that lines up pretty well with this level. So maybe about $2.30 would be your ideal first target to the downside. And then if we go to the daily charts, that puts it right in the middle of the range here in terms of moving averages, so anywhere between here and there. But Link, all right, let's see here. So the moon says we'll hit 14K next month. Well, I certainly hope so. But hey, 14K was a long ways to go from here. Anything can happen. This is crypto, right? So taking a quick aside here, if you're not familiar with the Node Insider site, remember I am running a promotion if you want to join the community, but if you want to get more information, this I believe is linked in the video notes here, learncryptotrading.info. It's going to give you a little bit more information about what this site contains, just some of the information you get here. The video course library, of course, is included. I would highly recommend checking that out. And in fact, some of these videos are open for anybody to go watch. So you can go to nodeinsiders.com/education and you can get access to a few of those. And so you can even watch a little preview video to see how it works and check out some features and all that good stuff. So go check that out to nodeinsiders.com or the informational page here, learncryptotrading.info, if you want to get more information. And there is a promotion that runs through the end of January. If you use promo code 2020, you get $20 off your first payment. So nodeinsiders.com. But we'll see. I'm looking for a little bit of a bounce here on the BTC side. Thinking maybe we bounce off this zone here. Going to the really short time frames here, right? We've had this pullback. It's still riding the moving averages down. You can see these little quick bounces into the moving average, pulling back, bounce, pulling back. But this could be a little bit of a double low starting to form here on that, short, very, very short time frames, right? The half-hour one. Getting back over 83.60 sets it up for a potential pop to around 84 and change. And then again, as I said, the big target here in the near term on the way up is around 8,500. That's going to be your first resistance level on the way up. And then after that, the most recent highs of this chop zone that we've seen here develop over the last day or so, that's 87, 8,800, that little range there. But there wasn't a whole lot to do this week other than maybe look for those quick scalps on the BTC side, just because these chop zones here are very tough to trade if you want to use stops and tight stops and all that, because I mean price trades in this range, but then you get these quick shakeouts. Look at those wicks. So if you're trying to buy the dip and you put your stop down here, then you get wicked out, pops right back up, then you get wicked out, pops back up. If you're trying to go short, if you chase the drop, it pops right back up, takes out all the shorts, wicks you up, then rolls over. So very tough to trade, very frustrating, and I've learned the hard way. Just usually step aside during these type of markets, and I just wait for things to play out one way or the other, or you just trade with much smaller size than you normally would. This is certainly not, when you get these flat range bound markets, these are not environments that I like to go too heavy in and go all in or something, just because the little chops really start to add up, right? A small loss here, small loss there, small loss here, and next thing you know, it's turned into quite the move, quite the loss over the course of several days, and the price has just done nothing, right? And so these are very tough trading ranges to play. So it's either flat or, if you were still short from up here, then you could have held and started to scale out there. But the chop zone, the wick zone, generally just a good idea to avoid altogether. But here we are bouncing, trying to get off of this first support level, 8,200. That's what I want to see hold on the daily charts. If it starts to hold around 8,200, at most 8K, that'd be ideal on the pullback, and that would set up for a higher time frame consolidation and potential push out of that 9K range going into February or mid-February or so. But if not, then if we start the lower highs and lower lows on the daily charts, then my downside targets are much lower before the halvening. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Okay, let's see here. What do you think of breakout blockchain games like Axie Infinity? I think that's a huge opportunity. And what I've been doing a lot of research on here and kind of dabbling a little bit is the NFT markets, which that's going to be a big market here, I think, this year. Certainly worth watching. I'm probably going to have to put some tutorials or some videos together for those, because it can be a little bit complicated at first to kind of get started with the marketplaces and the browser-based wallets and all of that fun stuff. But the NFTs, you know, the non-fungible tokens, if you call them, and that includes a lot of things, right? That's, you know, the biggest example that people are familiar with are the crypto kitties from last year. But, you know, now that's kind of evolved into a little bit more, you know, a little bit more intelligent type of tokens. You get the trading cards, the gaming cards, Decentraland, you know, the mana token that can buy wearables or land parcels that you could build on or rent out. Like, there's just so much more you can do with them now. So the NFT market's certainly very interesting. And, you know, it's more, it's totally different than trading, you know, altcoins, because at that point it's more psychology, collector mindsets, right? There's the big rush, the, you know, the mania phases, and you got to just kind of time when you get in and out of certain markets, and all that stuff. So it's a little bit more fun in some ways, but kind of just a whole different mindset, I think, from just your typical altcoin tradings. But I think the NFT market's certainly ripe to start taking off here. Bouncing around those old levels, getting those wicks perfectly. Yeah, I mean, if you want to take the quick scalps, I think there's a lot of opportunity to trade those wicks if you have like standing orders in place. But if you don't time it right, then yeah, you're gonna get chopped out. It's a little bit tougher to trade those versus when you're trading markets like this, where you're taking a breakout or you're looking for these really tight consolidations, these continuation patterns, you know, and that's your ideal, right? So like if, let's say you miss this run up, price pulls back, then it pops right back up and it starts to do one of these, right? Like in these cases, a lot of times I'll preempt the breakout and I'll start scaling in with a stop, you know, down here, because there's a clear support level after a run up. And so that makes more sense. And then you kind of preempt the breakouts and buying the little dips there. Or you have orders like right at the breakout point and you jump right on after it breaks out. So, you know, that makes more sense than the flat sideways after, you know, the quick drop and then just the flat sideways. Those are a little bit more challenging, I think. They're just choppier, more prone to the BART pattern. So it's just really tougher to play those. Okay, what else do we got going on here? So let's see here. Lisk Aeon looks like it's coming off the bottom there, trying to make a little reversal, and then a bunch of small cap names have been popping off the lows, but I'm always suspect of those quick spikes off the lows when they've been in massive downtrends. We were watching names like Golem. Remember names like Golem from yesteryear? Massive spike off the low, pulling right back to these moving averages. Was on the trending list yesterday or the day before. So interesting to see that one coming back to life here near term. I have no idea if this project's still around or doing anything, but I mean, look at this, just kind of a name from yesteryear. But near term, for whatever reason, getting a little bit of a spike. Civic popped here, pulling back, but again was, you know, just one of those names that have been pulling right back down for a long time. Wax maybe moving in sympathy with wrong one. Here we go. Kind of finding a little bit of a low, but again, you can see these are all just microcap names, right? Aeon showed up on the trending list earlier this week and just continues to push higher. Been making higher highs, higher lows, and if you look at the daily chart, that's coming off a long downtrend. But maybe finding a low. Look at the volume. This volume is really suspect. I'm like, is this wash trading? Like, what the heck is going on here? All right, look at this crazy volume. But I mean, it's just made this long flat tail and maybe turning the corner. But always in perspective. I mean, look at this thing. Holy moly! It's like this is yeesh. Was Aeon really that high when it launched? Good grief! It's come off quite a bit there. But you got to really zoom in with the microscope to see the wiggles near term. But here's the 4-hour chart. And if you measure it, of course, in percentages, which we do as traders, you know, this is about a 20% move so far. But, you know, all smart, small cap, micro cap, yeah, is really the way to say it. Micro cap crap coins for the most part. So not a whole lot on the trending list just yet. The bot status, a few names still holding up relatively well. All in all, I'm still thinking large cap over small cap near term. Let me go look at the BMI list here. Aeon, Atom. Let's go look at Atom. DLT engine, we looked at that. EOS, we looked at that. Lend. Okay. Small cap land. Lend. Actually, this one has been in and out of the radar for the last couple of weeks here, but this one's consolidating, interestingly enough, at the highs here. What were some of the other ones? DLT. Yeah. Atom. I don't know. This one's suspect to me. I mean, I know a lot of this is, now they're going to do staking on certain exchanges and all that, but if it drops this low, I think that's it. It's already broken the rising trend. It pulled back. It tried to rally, made a lower high. It's kind of vulnerable here. If it starts to go sideways a little longer, then I think it looks better. But for now, caution on that one. Let's see, EOS. We already looked at a lot of these. Most of these other names are just small cap. NEM's pulling back here a little bit from that quick pop off the lows yesterday. But, other than that, just kind of getting these quick spikes. Polymath. Remember Polymath? Crap coin. All right. That's it, my friends. So just caution remains for now. We'll see if the dip holds. I think we see a little bit of a bounce, but who knows? Gonna have to wait and see here. Today's target, if it does bounce 8,500 today/tomorrow. After that, then it just kind of all depends on the price action, and by that I mean, how's the volume look? Where does the resistance start showing up? Where do the sellers start showing up? All that good stuff. If it pulls back, does it make a higher low and then shoot right back up? Those type of things. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for here. Let's see here. Yes, thank you, Crypto Maniac. Hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen. What else here? What was I going to look at? Oh, BSV. Yeah, BSV looks done. Lower high. If it loses 240, look out below. Okay. So if you joined late, just a quick recap. Probably my favorite names right now in big cap land. EOS, ETH. Still looking pretty good. Ready to potentially pop there. Stellar on the pullback. If it can hold above the moving average there. And that's probably it. Tezos is still outperforming, but I'm scaled out of that guy. Engine, trying to test some resistance here. Theta in small cap land, maybe trying to push higher there, but And then of course BTC is definitely the one to be watching this week. So we'll see where this one ends up. But hey, what do you guys think? Is this just a lower high in the broader down macro trend that we've seen here, and we're going to start to undercut these lows, or is this the beginning of a reversal for the overall price, and 9K plus will be in the rear view mirror soon? Let's do this here. So that looks good there. Maybe a throwback to the line. Think there's a good dip buy. 61.50 next target. If it recaptures this 9100 level, then at that point I think things look really good. If it pops right back above there, it starts to make that higher low, things start to turn the corner there. But we're kind of at an interesting juncture here. After running right up to that 200-day moving average, and there was multiple other resistance levels. It was certainly a confluence. We're pulling right back. This is going to be kind of a key support zone here for the bulls. If if the bulls are going to want to maintain this broader uptrend that started here in December, then this is kind of where they start stepping in here. If it starts to dip way too low, then I think this just looks like another lower high. So could go either way. I'm rooting for the bulls though. Come on, guys. Come on. Enough of this downtrend already. Although, longer term, I'm bullish, especially after the halving. So if it does dip back into 6Ks, man, I will gladly take that opportunity. If. That's a big if. So, yeah, the China holiday is another thing too to be note of. Absolutely. I'm just reading the comments. Yeah, that's possible that the halving's priced in. I mean, it's certainly possible. Last year was a huge run. But I don't know if it's priced in, like the front run might be priced in, but I think the fundamental aspect of the halving, right after May when the block rewards really reduced, and you know, at that point you're looking at a large percentage of the overall Bitcoin that will ever be released is already going to be out. You know, over the next couple of years, the supply curve really starts to drop, or the inflation curve starts to drop. And that's the biggest thing that Bitcoin has going for it. You got to remember that, you know, the inflation curve looks like this. You know, the early years, there was a ton of Bitcoin coming out, and then it starts to slow down, right? The rate of new Bitcoin coming out of the market. And then it does kind of there's a point in time where it really starts to flatten out, and we're approaching that, right? We're approaching that point where, you know, where the curve suddenly flattens out. And, you know, at that point, it's just supply and demand economics, right? Because if the price or the supply begins to be relatively fixed, and you know it's going to take a long time for the next million Bitcoin to come out, then it's just supply demand economics. If people want more BTC, hedge funds want to pick it up, mutual funds want to pick it up, if ETFs want to pick it up, then it gets a lot more scarce from that perspective, and so that would just by definition drive the price. Now, of course, that doesn't factor in derivatives and all that other fun stuff, which we know will continue to be produced. But, you know, just a broader supply-demand economic curve of BTC that's the biggest thing it has going for it right now. And we're quickly approaching that point, especially with the halving coming up. So, okay. Well, that's going to do it for today, guys. Appreciate you joining. As always, appreciate the comments. And we'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.